order for this industry to grow up and take advantage of the cost reductions that we've driven so heroically over the last 40 years, we need to take the next step that moves us beyond being, quite frankly, held captive policy. We are absolutely captive to the ITC, to net energy metering, to all those features, and we fight tooth and claw for them because a big chunk of the industry will disappear without them. Obviously, we should be fighting for these things, but at the same time, we need to move beyond them. Full stop. Our model is broken.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Earthlings 2.0, the show where we imagine how we could be better versions of ourselves and build a collective future we actually want to live in. Today, we continue our exploration of how we can shorten the time it takes for new energy technologies such as solar or EV chargers to be connected to the grid. It's called interconnection, and utilities are notoriously backlogged with these activities for a lot of good reasons. And beyond this, we learned in episode number 91 with Arch Rao at Span, we'll put that link in the show notes, that another complication is the high cost and complexity of integrating these solutions into existing home electrical systems. Traditional installations often require expensive and time-consuming upgrades to the home's electrical panel, and you do get expanded functionality with the upgrade, but it does cost you more. So, not only is this a barrier to widespread adoption, it's a compounding challenge. According to Pecan Street in the US alone, almost 50 million homes will require some level of electrical upgrade to accommodate the shift towards all electric living. That's around 35% of the total US housing stock that'll need an upgrade to add an EV charger or a heat pump or a rooftop solar. And asking homeowners to add this additional cost, which could run like $1,000 to $5,000 on top of everything else, is just another barrier. So, this wired paradigm that we have been living in, permitting, net metering, etc., it seems to be bumping up against some of its own barriers to growth. And our guest today says he has a window into the future of the energy transition, and it looks more plug-in than hardwired. But before we dive in, I'm your host, Lisa Ann Pinkerton. I'm the CEO of the award-winning technology PR firm Technica Communications and the founder of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. And whether this is your first or your 50th episode, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. And if you want to, you're welcome to leave us a comment on our YouTube channel here. Go ahead and hit the like or subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that yet, or leave us a review if you'd like. And if you've listened to more than 5 episodes, I bet you have an opinion on what you think about the show. And I'd love you to leave a review if you want to. And if you're talking about podcasts or YouTube shows with a friend of yours, please feel free to let them know about Earthlings 2.0, especially if you're citing some information that you learned from the show. That is the best way to help us grow our community, and it's going to be really helpful for us. So thank you for those of you that are doing that. And join our newsletter so you can get a monthly digest of what we've got going on the show. And, feel free to share and look through our social media channels, and then you'll get a weekly update on new things that are happening. And thank you to Resource Labs for having us on the network. Our guest today is Whit Fulton, founder and chief product officer at ConnectDER. ConnectDER uses meter socket adapters to simplify the interconnection process and removes the need for major electrical overhauls to a home just to add solar or EV chargers. It all is very plug and play. He has more than 2 decades of experience spanning smarter development, renewable energy policy, and distributed energy integration. And he has been at the forefront of solving some of the thorniest challenges in the energy transition. Before founding ConnectDER, he held leadership roles at companies like GridPoint and Performance Systems Development, where he developed groundbreaking business models for encouraging adoption of distributed resources at the residential level. We're catching up with him from his home in Maryland, And we kicked off the conversation around this big interconnection challenge in the US and why it's both a micro and a macro problem.
If you start with the micro, the at the end of the day, when people think about solar power, they think about this, it's literally a small industrial project with an army of, effectively an Army Corps of engineers, planners, permitters, et cetera, that has to go through and roll through everything in order to get those panels on your roof. Oftentimes, 3 to 6 month process from first phone call to actually having the system energized. And most people, who adopt it now have adopted it in part. There's the green credentials. You want to do something environmental, but most people also do it because it is, economically viable. You're going to save money either in the short or longer term. And but you still have to get over all of that sort of those additional hurdles and be really dedicated to wanting to have this happen, as just because that's the way it is. So that's sort of the micro problem. The micro problem that connector set out to solve was the notion that, when you're actually physically connecting, solar panels, energy storage, EV chargers into the service panel in your house. You talked about the opening of the show. Like, the service panel is hard to reach, it's old, it's recessed, it's easy to replace for whatever reason. And it is literally a custom job in every home. And the vision behind Connector, quite simply, was, what are the things we can do with the existing built environment that can take a lot of the complexity out of that process? And the notion was, there's behind every meter on every side of every, single family residential house, you've got a big socket. And that socket is universal and it is sized to the input intake of the entire home. So, one day when I was doing some work with the utility, I saw a meter change out. And this is back when I was with a company called GridPoint that had, 1.0, call it Tesla Powerwall, like this, the original, granddaddy of that vision of putting batteries in houses. And the economics of installing it were just killing us. They're just so bad. Because you had to put transfer switches in, you had to run sub panels, you had to get the freaking lead acid batteries down the stairs into the basement. It was so rough, but it was such a great idea. The core of the idea was really, really good. And I recognized in the meter change out that we don't have to do any of that garbage as far as taking the stuff inside the house and putting it on the stairs and all that stuff. We can just plug it in. And in order to do that, we made what we call a meter socket adapter. The origination of the idea was on 2008, and we got the company off the ground in maybe 2011 with some funding from the DOE Sunshot program, which is awesome. Shout out to DOE and Sunshot, RIP Sunshot, but it will rise again someday. And the long story short is, you can put an adapter between the meter and the meter socket, and in that adapter, you create a plug-in socket point where you can literally just plug the inverter in, so long as you meet the criteria for, circuit breakers, overcurrent protection, touch safe interfaces, et cetera, et cetera. So we got that off the ground, and at the end of the day, it's sort of like what, in the industry, it's known as a line side tap. You're sort of tapping into the wires and the mains, only you don't need any sort of, break the wires. You're at a really high value point for adding a connection point there. So that's sort of the core innovation. There's a bunch of other things we do inside adapters. We like 25,000, 30,000 of them deployed now. But in its heart of hearts, the idea is to simplify the process and turn those assets into appliances. And that's where we really need to go as an industry and overall.
Let's talk a little bit more about this socket adapter. It's about the same size as the meter face. It's big, has a big circle.
Yep.
And so it kind of goes between the meter and the house.
That's correct. This is a meter socket adapter. You plug these guys in over here into the meter socket. This goes back in front. Of course, you can see the meter plugs back in front of it. And then it's got this connection point on top, which I've completely disappeared because of the way it works now. Anyway, this connection point on top allows you to plug the solar in, or a UV charger, or battery storage.
Okay. And does it work with any type of meter, or does it have to be a smart meter?
Works with any type of meter. It's like you could plug. I mean, not commercial. It is scaled for residential scale up to 200 amps, which is about 95% of homes. So we're close to universal.
And then are you limited into terms of what you can plug in, the size of the systems that you can plug in for an EV charger or solar panels?
Yeah, for solar panels, we can go up to about 15 amps. It's pretty big system for single family. That'll cover the basis for the vast majority of them. And for EV chargers, we can do a 60 amp circuit breaker, so a 48 amp charger. So that's that'll handle most level 2 needs.
I mean, I can see how it would speed up the interconnection because it's almost like putting that in the control of the homeowner or the person who's installing the distributed energy devices. But then do you still have to wait for the utility to do anything? Is there a special permission that you need to get before you take the socket adapter and put it between your meter and the house?
Yeah, it depends on jurisdiction. The place we got started was Vermont. Thank you, Vermont. You rock, Vermont. Whoever Vermont listening, you're amazing people. The model up there was effectively Green Mountain Power said, we've tested this, it's approved, it makes sense. The solar installer can pull the meter, install it themselves, and then we'll just come through periodically and check later on if it's all installed right. Easy peasy. The market normalized on it pretty quickly, actually, in the sort of the mid teens of about a decade ago, because it was so easy to use, and the net energy metering was 1-to-1. Batteries weren't really a big thing back then, so everything sort of the stars aligned to be a really good asset there. And so from then on, the notion was to scale the market with the Vermont model. If you use the Vermont model, then it's easy peasy. Other utilities want to take a little more hands-on approach. They'll either have to pull the meter, you got to schedule them to come out and pull the meter, or they schedule and they'll install the adapter itself. Um, it varies, but in most markets we're at 20 states now, we have it down to where the installer does the installation. Occasionally, the utility is involved in the meter pull.
So it's going to shorten the time frame a bit, but you still sort of have to go through a few hoops.
The time and effort saved isn't so much from the utility interconnection, it's from all the other stuff you'd have to do on a house. If you want to do a service panel upgrade, yes, there is a long utility lag in some cases, like California in particular is notorious for having long lags for service upgrades and be able to do power cuts and things like that. But for everybody else, the vast majority of the time and savings is in just the speed with which you can connect one of these things. You get about 15 minutes end to end. It's plugged in, it's installed, it's ready to go. You connect the solar and you're done. It's sort of like a mic drop moment. You walk away, you're done. It's incredibly fast. Instead of doing drilling into the inside of the house in the East Coast, where the service panels at the basement or the garage, or on the West Coast where the service panel might be 100 amps, which is pretty frequent. So there are other technologies out there that allow you to avoid service panel upgrades. But this is just dead simple. It's simple, it's quick, it's really low cost, and it's the same every single time. So the amount of training you need to do for solar installers is actually pretty minimal. The other thing we should talk about here is some of the other pain points around integrating solar or electric vehicles and those things into the home. If you want to get the most use out of them, is the fact there's no real data available for those things. Those assets are increasingly data hungry. They are constantly pulling for data like how much power is the home using? How much power should I be producing? Should I send it to the home? Should it be routed to the grid depending on net usage, things like that? And we are also now offering the opportunity to pull that data out of the device as well. So we have a data interface on it that feeds those hungry devices that need that information to allow them to operate in a much more sophisticated way and continue, but still on a plug and play basis. So everything's plug it in.
So then how many of these devices have you installed so far?
Probably we're getting close to 30,000. We've shipped about 30,000. There's probably, if you look at the warehousing, but yeah, it's about 30,000. The long pole in the tent for us has always been California. Because we're in Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Illinois, a bunch of Northeast states, but California, for a variety of reasons, has always been a challenge for us, in part because the utilities had their own versions of this product, which we thought were not as good as ours, but that was the way the cookie crumbled. But now there's a new adoption of more customer-owned devices in California, which we help push through on a regulatory basis. And we are going to be launching these products in California in the next 2 or 3 months. Well, actually, by the time this podcast airs, we should be well underway, and with a bunch of great partners out there too.
And this whole concept of making the installation faster and easier um, is sort of this part of this paradigm shift that you and I have talked about, going from hardwired to plug in. And we've had a couple of other folks on the show talking about their plug-in devices. We'll link those in the show notes. But tell me from your perspective, what is this shift that's happening now, and where are we on that shift?
If you look back at sort of the origins of the industry, let's call the origins like the late 70s, early 80s, when people sort of first started putting solar panels on roofs, Jimmy Carter had them in the White House, et cetera, et cetera. It was just this real niche, extremely expensive technology, just extremely expensive. And as a result of that, we were able to come up with the concept of net energy metering, because back then it was just bananas that you would ever have a proliferation in the market that would actually move the needle in any way, shape, or form. And so it was a nice to haves for these crazy greenies who put the panels on the roof. But lo and behold, come to the 2000s, come to 2010, you have a combination of factors really pulling together. Like you've got obviously crashing prices for the silicon. That itself, the solar panels have just precipitously fallen, in large part thanks to China. We should be thankful to China for just driving that price way, way down. Um, and then you also had just the financing issues as well. Someone cracked the code on financing. You've got third party ownership. You've got solar leases. You've got a whole bunch of products that are brought to the table, the equivalent of a car purchase. The big difference there is people know how to buy cars. They know what a car is. They know how to buy it. They know how to do a comparison shop, et cetera, et cetera. No, most people will buy solar once, maybe twice in their lives. If they move into a house, they get it again. So we cracked some of the code on financing and the cost of the systems themselves. We are also being propped up for a long time in this structured paradigm. Everything was wired. Everything was kind of the same. You might add on more analytics. You might add on more ways to tell if your system is working properly or not. You might come up with better permitting systems. But at the end of the day, it's still an iteration of the same fundamental model we've had for the last 40 years. It's like get the panels, source the roof, do the racking, get the inverter, get the permitting, get the play out the system, get the job for the. It's much better and faster and cleaner than it used to be, but it's still the same freaking thing.
And there's still a tremendous amount of soft costs built into the total cost that a homeowner might pay, when the panels and the equipment themselves is only a fraction of the total cost. And we still really haven't figured out how to reduce those soft costs. I remember Eric Wessoff saying back in 2010 that soft cost reduction was the next big focus for the industry because technology had been figured out. China was pushing down prices. Let's move on to soft costs. And here we are 15 years later, and it's still an issue.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why it's still an issue. And this is one opinion in the wilderness. It may not be a popular opinion, but the way straight net energy metering and the investment tax credit have operated and renewable energy credits have operated, they've effectively propped up an industry, have pushed prices for those systems like it's way, way, way higher than they should be. At the end of the day, like you said, a $20,000 to $30,000 10 kW system, sort of and cost to customer. It's about $2,000 is the panels. It's a 10 kW. And then you've got the inverter, you've got some extra wiring, some racking. But grand total for the total cost of the equipment, maybe $3,000 to $4,000
I was going to say $5,000 max.
max, and that's you're still getting charged like $20,000 to $30,000. So much of that is in the soft costs, the permitting stuff, but a lot of it is in the cost of sale. It's because we are selling a product door to door or through advertising, whatever it is, that people expect to pay that much for and have 9, maybe 10-year payback in some cases. People are still doing it, but we're selling the same thing. And in order for this industry to grow up and take advantage of the cost reductions that we've driven so heroically over the last 40 years, we need to take the next step that moves us beyond being, quite frankly, held captive policy. We are absolutely captive to the ITC, to net energy metering, to all those features, and we fight tooth and claw for them because a big chunk of the industry will disappear without them. Obviously, we should be fighting for these things, but at the same time, we need to move beyond them. Full stop. Our model is broken, and this is I'm echoing something that was the Jigger was talking about 2 or 3 months ago with Catherine Hamilton about like, do we have a product market fit issue for solar? And same thing honestly for EVs and for battery storage. We need to change the paradigm. And so long as people are buying these industrial projects on their houses that is propped up by industrial policy and stuff that utilities hate as far as the energy metering goes, we are going to be in a really, really precarious situation where, quite frankly, we shouldn't have to be.
When Jigger was talking about, do we have a product market fit problem for solar? Is he saying the product market fit in terms of the cost?
Yeah, the cost is a big piece of it. It's just the offering. Guys banging on doors trying to sell solar. High turnover in that industry. But quite frankly, the fundamental fact that like you as a homeowner need to negotiate with the solar installers, you have multiple quotes, and then you got to go through the process of approving the design. You don't know for sure if the installer is good or not, if they're still going to be in business or not. You don't know if your inverter, you have to do all that research yourself, or you have to take the installer's word for it. It's still not mature, and it's still very, very piecemeal, the way all the hoops you need to jump through in order to get it.
It sounds very much similar to the problem the automotive industry had back in the 30s and 40s, and why we now have dealerships, because the argument was that the consumer wasn't educated enough, they were at a disadvantage, they didn't understand what they were buying or how to buy, and they needed the dealers to help them along that journey. And now we're at a place where you don't need a dealer because the internet has all the you frankly show up knowing more about the car you want to buy than the dealer does, the person that you're speaking to. And that's especially true for EVs. And then there was something else you mentioned around the ITC and all of these tax credits and such that we've got that has propped up the industry. And frankly, we wouldn't have an industry if we didn't have those policy solutions in place, right? So they were an ideal solution to a previous problem. But now we have a new problem. And so, from your perspective, what is the new problem?
Well, the new problem is we built up the industry rather than getting ourselves weaned off the tax credits. We built up the industry to be hyper dependent on the tax credits. Like we built it foundational rather than a scaffolding. And that was the key. So if we treat it as scaffolding, what are the things we need to be doing under cover of that support structure that allow us to be full-fledged and grow without it, or continue building? And as far as I'm concerned, we have an opportunity to take a technology-based pivot to allow us to be completely not beholden to net energy metering nor to the ITC anymore, because the fundamental costs of the production technology, the solar, of the battery storage is likely to follow the same path downward over the next 3 to 5 years. There'll be much better packaging, much better economies of scale. Like we are going to follow the same path downward. And once you have the solar plus the energy storage and or an EV, which is bidirectional, you have a package of technologies that can be a power plant on a home that can power that home effectively, maybe not in perpetuity, but take a huge chunk out of the power bill every month from that house. And in order to do that, we need to develop the suite of technologies that bypasses permitting and bypasses all of the bespoke, really deep knowledge that NABCEP, which is an incredible organization, has done an amazing job of producing best in class and producing quality in the industry. We need to grow beyond that as well, quite frankly. We need to have a model in which the installation of these things is so dead simple, you don't need specialized in information or training. It has to be all plug and play, and it has to just work, and it has to be quick, and it has to be like an appliance. And that's where we'd like to go ConnectDER. I don't want to get too far out over my skis in terms of the specific things we're working on, but those are the generalized themes.
The idea that you would have these products be more plug and play, I can sense that there'd be a lot of pushback from utilities on that because the reason it takes so long to interconnect some of these devices is because they need to know how that device is going to affect the load on that node within the grid. And there's a lot of safety concerns. We're talking about electricity here, very dangerous. How do we balance the plug-in aspect of the future that you're painting for us with the control that the utilities tend to like to have?
I'll say it's a two-stage solution. The first stage is non-export. The constraints in Hawaii, where everything had to go to self-supply and non-export for every additional solar storage system went on there. We developed the technology to do that. Not we, but the industry did. It exists. So if you have a model in which someone can plug in things in their house and it's not exporting, so there's no net energy metering, you're not sending any power back to the grid. This is all self-consumption. You're just doing load shifting of your own production. Then, so long as it is whitelisted, UL listed, effectively approved technology, utility can't tell you what they can put in your house or not. You put it on yourself. The seeds of this industry already exist. Look at the glamping batteries that are out there. All the mobile, energy storage that is coming out now that effectively is migrating sort of up the food chain from being you plug into your wall to plug a bigger one into your wall and back up some of your stuff. Oh, plug in some of these DC panels to it if you want to have some ride through for an outage. This is the low-hanging fruit version of the broader vision for that kind of where the industry needs to go. And once those things scale up in the right way, we have an opportunity effectively, because the roadmap's there. I mean, it's already, you plug it in. Utility can't tell me not to get a glamping battery that's for self-consumption. It already exists. And I can plug solar panels into it. It already exists. No export. Everything behind the meter doesn't matter. Utility can't stop it. So that's sort of that's the first level. Second level, if those things already make economic sense on their own and are extremely widespread because of the value inherent in what they do for the homeowner, as far as backing up power, as far as cutting down your power bill, they still exist in effectively sort of a network of dispatchability. Those assets are out there and can be taken advantage of if the utility wants to put together or enable a VPP world in which those things can suddenly dispatch back to the grid on a safe, controlled, dispatchable basis. So build the army first on its own value, then leverage the army for higher value to the grid once it's there already. That's sort of the next stage vision.
And I can see how when the plug-in movement would really gain scale, that there would still be pushback from utilities because now you're upending their business model and now they have more generation capacity than anybody's using because now everybody's doing self-consumption, right? Reminds me of why we weren't allowed to put in rain barrels at our house in Ohio because the city said, well, if everybody collected their rainwater, then there would be no water going into the municipal solution for everybody else, right? So nobody's allowed to collect it. And I feel like we would get a similar argument or pushback from the utilities at some point when there's not enough people consuming the power that they're generating. And so now they have balance of supply and demand issues.
It is the next logical extension of where sort of the pendulum would swing. The two responses to that are, one, that's super far off. Given the growth in AI demand at data centers, like we are going to be begging for any kilowatt hour we can get for the next 10 years at least, if not beyond that. So I'm not really worried about that particular issue. I think utilities will be like, okay, as this demand's going down, that's just fine. That's okay. Just do it, and we'll catch up with you later because we got all this demand over here we got to take care of. So that's one hypothesis. The second hypothesis is like, yes, utilities could just jack up fixed charges. Like once a month, they're like, yeah, that's gonna be $500 a month, fixed charge. You can't get around it. Just because that's what we're going to charge everyone.
Just to be connected to the grid.
So just because to the grid. The question is, how can they justify that for everyone? And they can't, So ultimately, there's going to be a notion of how do we take advantage of these resources that are out there for a higher value stack, where the idea of dispatchability through a VPP-like model for these assets utility can take advantage of it at a lower cost basis than building new generation. Now, they're gonna have to figure out how to like make profit off of that. Maybe it goes to the rate base, maybe it doesn't. If we get to the point where we are forcing that issue, we will have done an incredible thing. So I'm very, as an industry, so I'm very, very bullish on pursuing this model.
It'll be a good problem to have. Well, going back to what you were saying related to how the industry is a bit over dependent on some of the incentives and the tax credits that are available. We saw a tremendous amount of pushback with NEM 3.0 that came through California. People have said they've effectively destroyed the industry. There's a lot of pain there. Do you see that policy change as part of attempting to wean the industry off of the gravy train that it has been enjoying over the past few years?
I wish that were the impetus behind it. I don't think it had anything to do. They don't give a hoot about the industry. I think it was simply okay. Utilities are feeling the pain of this cost shift, and it's real. Look, let's not mince words here. Like you can say that up to a certain level of penetration, solar is net beneficial for avoiding some grid upgrades. But past a certain point of penetration, you actually get into the point where solar actually has a substantial impact on the grid. Just full stop. Once you're at high levels of penetration, you do need to beef up the grid to continue to manage the two-way flows, to manage the imbalances, and to manage the rapid rise and fall on the grid every day. It's just the truth. Like that's and like I did power market forecasting analysis for 8 years before I went to GridPoint, and I am a massive, massive proponent of distributed resources. Like absolutely, I think they are the way forward. I think they're clean. I think they're economically close to load. It's a close to market solution, but it has to acknowledge the truth of its nature in order for you to get beyond where it is right now. And so, yeah, net energy metering was like, it's kind of like, yeah, being shoved off the boat. I wish that we had like been given more opportunity to learn to swim before we got shoved off the boat. But, lo and behold, the industry learned how to swim because battery storage is the way forward. And meter socket adapters, like what we're making, is a huge part of that. Tesla came out with a backup switch. We had been working on a backup switch for a while, but we got distracted by our EV product. It really bugs me that they beat us to market. That's okay. It's the nature of the game. We have an extra generation product coming out next year we think is a massive improvement and step forward in that area, which in fact should be the baseline enabling technology of this plug and play universe that I'm hoping to see flourish.
What needs to happen on a policy level, on a regulation level, to allow more of these appliance devices to come online? There's a lot of companies out there who are sort of starting to sell some of these products. A lot of them are a lot earlier than you are. You say you have like 30,000 devices already. Some of these other companies haven't sold a single one yet. But there's an entire ecosystem of startups that are starting to play in this space. What needs to happen to support this movement?
On the one hand, there's sort of the real baseline plug-in universe where you have, the some of the European models where you've got balcony solar, taking off 120 amp, 120 volts. You can just plug it into a socket there. I don't completely understand the idea of having a load and a source on the same circuit behind a single circuit breaker. But I suppose if you keep the amperage low enough within tolerance, there you should be kind of okay, maybe. But maybe a little monitoring on the circuit breaker. I'm not sure, but I know people have solved this problem, and I haven't really dug into it. Seeing a broader proliferation of policies like that, like in Utah just passed a law that said you can do these plug-in solar DER stuff. That's a big step forward, and finding ways to continue to nudge that across the line to allow a much lower cost plug-in model for these sort of load shaving assets. Like it's a much faster way to proliferate, and I think it's a great solution. I think that is sort of a natural extension of sort of the glamping battery model. I keep calling it glamping battery. It's the mobile battery storage, back at power stuff. We've been fighting policy fights on a state by state, utility by utility basis for the last 13 years. And we've gotten to the point we've gotten pretty good at it. We've gotten pretty good at getting states to pass laws or regulatory commissions to, assert policies and dockets that say, hey, you've got to allow safe UL listed meter socket adapters to be used on your system. Full stop. And we've sort of pushed that through. But I don't want to have policy fights. This shouldn't be a policy fight world. We should be getting away from policy fights. And so personally, my personal drive here is for us to come up with a technology solution that allows us to bypass all of that crap. Just stop in such a way that I can go to Home Depot or I can call Sunrun or whoever it is and say, hey, I want solar right now. And they will drive a truck out in the next hour or two. They'll take a look at my roof. They'll install it that minute. They'll have the stuff on the truck. They'll put it out there. They'll install it and they'll bill me and they'll be done. That's it.
In that scenario, do you still need a certified electrician to make the final connections?
You do. You'd still need a certified electrician or someone who is, a company for that electrician is representing, and they have a solar electrician who does the final installation. But the meter socket adapter, as far as the enabling vision here, will always need to have a trained person, but it's a 15-minute job instead of like a 6-hour job. And mind you, I would love to see the plug-in socket, universal plug-in socket model be available on the sides of service panels, on the side, not just our adapter, but all new builds that have this universal plug-in point where you can effectively electrify your house by ordering on Amazon any number of peripherals. This could be a hot water heater. It could be, air source heat pump. All these things just plug in and you don't need wiring anymore. You can eliminate all the need for wiring of the beautiful ecosystem of things that click, 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 click. You've electrified. And it's easy and it's cheap. That's where we need to go.
Earthlings. I appreciate how Whit is forging a path towards a more plug-and-play future for distributed energy resources. Imagine a future where every house or apartment you move into has this universal power port. And, in your moving truck, along with your couch and your TV and your stereo system and all your scrapbooks from high school, you have your easy to deploy solar panel array that doubles as a shade structure for your porch or a portable EV charging unit. And each one is this appliance that just plugs into the house to generate or use power on site. So no hardwiring, no upgrades, no construction, no red tape. That shift could turn whole neighborhoods into nimble dispatchable power hubs that thrive with and without the grid. And this is already happening in Europe with solar shade structures for balconies. And this is adding more resiliency and independence where people want it. So this is a future we can get to if enough of us envision it and work to achieve it. And that momentum is building. This bill from Utah that passed, it's known as House Bill 340, creates a new portable solar generation device category. And that lets residents plug in solar kits up to 1.2 kilowatts through a standard 120 volt outlet. So no utility interconnection paperwork, no fees or extra equipment required. This motivation for this law was to lay groundwork for the solar balcony devices that are popular in Europe and help them move to the US. However, there is a catch. These systems on the market in Europe, they don't meet US electrical codes or have UL certification. So that means they're not legal to use yet in the United States. That certification work is underway and being spearheaded by another Earthlings 2.0 guest, Gizmo Power, and they've got funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, so stay tuned for more developments on that in that episode. It's coming up soon. Speaking of plugging into solar power to transform lives, our faith in humanity is restored this week by the remarkable women known as Solar Mamas of Zanzibar. Since 2015, 65 women, many with little or no formal education, have been trained in solar engineering through Barefoot College Zanzibar. These women have installed power kits in over 1,800 homes across 29 villages to bring clean, reliable energy to communities previously reliant on hazardous fuels like paraffin and charcoal. The training program selects women who are over 35 who exhibit leadership qualities. And after 3 months of hands-on instruction, each graduate receives 25 solar kits to install in their home village. Households pay a small monthly fee, making the system sustainable and providing the solar mamas with a source of income. Beyond electrification, this initiative is challenging traditional gender roles and empowering women to become professionals and community leaders. As one solar mama, Safara Hussein, put it, the program has opened my mind. To the solar mamas of Zanzibar, thank you for illuminating not just homes, but also the path forward to empowerment and sustainable development on this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home.